He was a man who had built an empire of glass and steel, a man who wore success like a tailored suit. But in one single, unforgivable moment, he would throw his entire world on the floor, right next to his mother's dinner. He demanded she eat like an animal, shamed by the very woman who gave him life. But it was his wife's response, a cold, calculated act of cruelty he never saw coming, that would shatter his world forever, proving that the deepest poverty isn't in an empty pocket, but in an ungrateful heart. If you believe that no mother deserves to be humiliated, comment now. Respect is everything. The scent of fried plantains and spicy jollof rice usually filled Samuel's penthouse apartment with a comforting warmth, a smell that reminded him of a childhood he was desperately trying to forget. Tonight, it felt suffocating. He loosened the knot of his silk tie, the city of Lagos twinkling below like a carpet of fallen stars. He had made it. From a dusty village with no running water to this monument of success, he was the man every mother dreamed her son would become. Every mother, it seemed, except his own. Mama Esther sat quietly at the far end of the long mahogany dining table, her presence a stark contrast to the minimalistic modern decor. Her hands, wrinkled and calloused from a lifetime of hard work, were folded in her lap. She wore a simple wrapper, its colors faded from countless washes, and her hair was tied in a traditional scarf. She was a living relic of his past, a past he now found deeply embarrassing. His wife, Grace, moved between them like a diplomat in a war zone, her smile strained as she placed the dishes on the table. Grace was modern, educated, and beautiful, the perfect accessory to his new life. She had always been kind to Mama Esther, treating her with a gentle patience that Samuel found increasingly irritating. He saw it not as kindness, but as tolerance for a problem he wished would simply disappear. Mama Esther had come to live with them 6 months ago, after his father passed. At first, it seemed like the right thing to do, the duty of a good son. But her village habits grated on his nerves. She hummed old hymns while he tried to close business deals on the phone. She spoke to the neighbors about his childhood struggles, stories he wanted buried forever. She prayed too loudly, her faith too raw, too unsophisticated for his new world of corporate atheism and polite society. The tension had been building for weeks. Last Tuesday, he had planned a crucial dinner with his boss, Mr. Adebayo, a man who held Samuel's next promotion in his hands. He'd rehearsed everything, the sophisticated conversation, the expensive wine he'd serve, the casual way he'd show off his apartment. But then he pictured Mama Esther at the table, eating with her hands as she sometimes did, telling a folksy story about a clever tortoise. The thought filled him with a cold dread. He canceled the dinner, feigning a sudden illness. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth, and the resentment he felt toward his mother began to curdle into something darker. Grace had noticed his growing impatience. "Be gentle with her, Samuel," she'd whispered late one night. "She's still grieving. This city is as foreign to her as the moon." But Samuel didn't see a grieving woman. He saw a threat to his carefully constructed identity. He saw the dirt of the village staining his polished floors. Tonight, the silence at the dinner table was heavy, broken only by the clinking of cutlery. Samuel ate quickly, his jaw tight. Mama Esther ate slowly, savoring each bite. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a gentle sadness. "You work so hard, my son," she said, her voice soft. "But you look tired. Your spirit looks tired. A tree that forgets its roots cannot bear fruit for long." It was a simple proverb, one she had told him 100 times as a child. But tonight it felt like an accusation. It was the spark that lit the fuse. "What would you know about my spirit?" Samuel snapped, his fork clattering onto his plate. "You know nothing of my world, of the pressures I face." Grace shot him a warning look, but he ignored it. The dam of his frustration had broken. "All you do is sit here, in my house, eating my food, and judging me with your old-fashioned nonsense." Mama Esther flinched, her eyes widening with hurt. I was not judging my son. I was only—" "Only what?" he sneered, standing up so abruptly his chair screeched against the floor. "Only reminding me of the poverty I clawed my way out of? Reminding me of the shame?" He was breathing heavily now, his face contorted with a rage that had been simmering for months. He looked at her plate of simple rice and stew, a meal she had cooked herself, and an ugly, venomous idea took hold. He snatched the plate from the table. The ceramic was warm in his hands. With a guttural roar, he hurled it to the floor. The plate shattered, scattering food across the gleaming tiles. The sound echoed in the silent room. Mama Esther gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Grace froze, her face a mask of disbelief. Samuel pointed a trembling finger at the mess. "You want to talk about roots? That is where you belong, on the ground. Now eat it. Eat it like the village dog you are." The cruelty of his own words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Time seemed to stand still. Mama Esther stared at the food on the floor, her body trembling. Then, with a dignity that broke Grace's heart, she slowly slid off her chair and knelt on the floor. She did not cry. She did not protest. With shaking hands, she began to pick up the grains of rice. Her silent obedience a louder condemnation than any scream. Samuel watched, a sick feeling of triumph mixing with a dawning horror. He looked at Grace, expecting what? Support? Understanding? Instead, he saw a stranger. Her face was pale, her eyes void of any emotion he recognized. There was no anger, no tears. There was only a terrifying, arctic calm. What happened next, Samuel would replay in his mind for the rest of his life. Grace did not rush to comfort Mama Esther. She did not scream at him. She simply stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. She walked not to the old woman on the floor, but to the expensive glass-fronted cabinet where they kept their finest china, the set they had received as a wedding gift, reserved only for the most important guests. Her hands were perfectly steady as she opened the cabinet and took out one of the ornate, gold-rimmed dinner plates. Samuel watched, confused. Was she going to reserve his mother? Was she making a point about civility? He couldn't read the chilling emptiness in her eyes. She walked back to the table, took the serving spoon, and calmly, methodically scooped his own portion of jollof rice and chicken onto the beautiful, expensive plate. Then she walked over to where he stood, looked him directly in the eye, and without a single word, she bent down and placed his dinner on the floor, right next to the scattered mess she had forced his mother to eat from. The delicate china clinked against the marble tile, the sound as final as a gavel strike. She then turned to his mother, who was still kneeling, and gently took her hand. "Come, Mama," Grace said, her voice soft but firm, a stark contrast to the violence of her actions. "You will not eat from the floor tonight. No one will." She helped the old woman to her feet, leading her away from the scene of her humiliation. She didn't look back at Samuel. She didn't have to. The image of his own dinner, served on their finest plate, sitting on the floor like scraps for an animal, was a mirror reflecting the monster he had become. The true cruelty wasn't in her action, but in its perfect, horrifying justice. "Grace, what is the meaning of this? Are you insane?" Samuel's voice was a mixture of outrage and disbelief. He stared at his plate on the floor, the symbol of his success now lying in filth. Grace turned at the doorway of the living room, Mama Esther leaning on her arm. The cold calm was still there, but now her eyes blazed with a righteous fire. "Insane?" she repeated, her voice dangerously low. "No, Samuel. For the first time in a long time, I am seeing with perfect clarity. You wanted to teach your mother a lesson about her place in this house. So I am simply clarifying the rules for everyone." She took a step back into the room, her gaze sweeping over the shattered plate, the scattered food, and his own pristine meal beside it. "If the woman who carried you for 9 months, who starved so you could eat, who sold her own clothes to pay for your school books, deserves to eat from the floor, then what does that say about the man she raised? What does that say about the home I live in? In this house, from now on, we will all eat at the same level. If she is on the floor, then so are you. So am I." The logic was flawless, inescapable, and it cut him deeper than any insult could. He was left speechless, his anger deflating into a hollow sense of dread. Grace didn't wait for a response. She guided Mama Esther to the guest bedroom and closed the door. A few minutes later, she emerged with a small suitcase. "I am taking her with me," she announced, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "She will stay with my aunt, where she will be treated with the honor she deserves." Samuel finally found his voice. "You're leaving me? Over this?" "I'm not leaving you, Samuel," Grace said, and this was perhaps the cruelest part. "I am removing a queen from a prison you have built for her. You will stay here, in your beautiful, empty home. You will sit with your success and your pride and this ugliness you have created. And you will decide what kind of man you want to be." From across the hall, a neighbor, Mrs. Okoro, who had heard the shouting, peered through her slightly ajar door. She saw Grace, poised and resolute, leading the frail old woman away, a silent witness to a son's public disgrace and a wife's quiet rebellion. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. The silence in the penthouse was no longer peaceful. It was accusatory. Every gleaming surface seemed to mock him, reflecting a hollow, lonely man. The smell of his mother's cooking was gone, replaced by the sterile scent of air freshener. Grace returned after 2 days, but she was a ghost in their home. They lived as roommates, the space between them filled with unspoken words. Samuel's work suffered, his confidence evaporated. The image of his mother kneeling on the floor was burned into his memory. He would wake up in a cold sweat, the sound of the shattering plate ringing in his ears. He had thrown away more than just a plate of food. He had thrown away his soul. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore. He begged Grace for the address of her aunt's house. He drove there, his expensive car, feeling like a gilded cage. He found his mother sitting on a simple veranda, shelling beans into a bowl. She looked peaceful, a decade younger than she had in his cold, modern apartment. When she saw him, she did not look angry. She looked sad. He fell to his knees before her, not on a marble floor, but in the red dust of the earth she came from. The tears he had held back for so long finally came, hot and shameful. "Mama, forgive me," he choked out, the words tearing from his throat. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." Mama Esther put down her bowl and reached out, her wrinkled hand stroking his hair, just as she had when he was a boy with a scraped knee. Her own tears fell, mingling with his. "I forgave you the moment the plate left your hand, my son," she whispered. "A mother's love does not keep a record of wrongs." Hope surged in Samuel's chest. "Then come home, Mama, please. The house is empty without you." But she shook her head gently, her eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful wisdom. She looked at him not as a son to be scolded, but as a man to be taught one final, painful lesson. She pulled him to his feet and held his hands. "I love you, Samuel, but I cannot come back to that house. Forgiveness is a gift, but trust must be rebuilt. And you must rebuild yourself first in a home that is quiet enough for you to hear your own heart." She let go of his hands, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Remember this, my child," she said, her voice carrying the weight of generations. "The man who spits on the plate of love will one day starve to death." He stood there, forgiven but not redeemed, the truth of her words echoing in the vast, empty space that was now his life. A home isn't built with expensive furniture or a view of the city lights. It's built with respect, gratitude, and the unconditional love of family. Samuel learned in the most brutal way that when you try to bury your roots, you end up burying yourself. He had to lose everything to understand what truly mattered. And you, have you ever witnessed someone forget where they came from in the pursuit of success? Or have you seen the incredible power of a quiet, dignified response to disrespect? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your story and your perspective matter. And now, if you are drawn to stories that reveal the deep truths of the human heart, there is a new story already appearing on your screen. Click on it and let's discover another powerful lesson together.